Hey, what's going on, Chelsea fans? Just quick heads up. This is an excerpt of a 2-hour megapod that we did covering all of Graham Potter. So again, this is just one part. If you want to see the other parts, check it out on YouTube. It'll be on our channel. Otherwise, if you want to listen to the entirety of the podcast, go to our, any podcast player, search London is Blue. You can get it there. Just a quick heads up. This is not the full pod, just an excerpt. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, so as we get into this Graham Potter special talking about Chelsea's new manager, that's right. You've been living under a rock. Graham Potter, new Chelsea manager. We had to bring our wonderful friend of the pod, new contributor, Sam, CFC Central, back to talk about what the expectation is for Graham Potter at Chelsea. And just maybe as a summary, Sam, as you kind of bed into this conversation here, what's your feeling or what's your short summary for Graham Potter at Chelsea?
Hey Dan, so good to be back again. So good to have our regular tea time conversations on Chelsea tactics. It's been a regular thing for me, for the past couple of months. So always looking forward to it. I think the two words that come to mind is cautious optimism. For me, I think it's a transitional team. It's a transitional time in every sense of the word. And I think it's a smart appointment. He's probably one of the best managers around in terms of his profile. He's had a burgeoning reputation. Somebody also brings a stylistic fit that is very close to what we've been working with. So in all sense of the word, if you had to look at somebody who has a good track record in terms of building long-term projects, I think we went for the right man. And it goes one of two ways from here, but up until now, I think all the right factors have been checked, and I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I haven't really seen a long-term manager at Chelsea before. So I'm just hoping that this one, just goes the right way and gives us, a dynasty to build on. So keeping my hopes in check, but also hopeful for the future.
Well, you've seen a long-term manager at Chelsea. Just our definition of long-term is 18 months versus other teams' long-term definition is years. We just view time differently. That's time is a construct, and we have to remember that the viewer of the construct can determine what a short or medium or long-term duration is. And maybe the question now is how can Todd Boehly and Graham Potter redefine the definition of a long or sustained period together with this new appointment?
No, for certain. I mean, it's just, I think, a good time to be a Chelsea fan. I think we've seen that the owners, God forbid, it could have gone any way with the owners. We could have gone the Glazer route. We could have gone anywhere, but we ended up with owners who definitely show that they're, willing to invest. Obviously, there were some interesting points made at the SALT conference the other day in terms of, I wouldn't mention the All-Star game, but I'm just saying in terms of valuing the academy and making sure that you have a long-term vision, building the kind of, sister network with various clubs and acquiring clubs where you can, instead of having a lone army, having players that could go out and get valuable first team experience. I think it just shows that the owners are invested. They know what they're trying to do and what they want to do. And I think that's everything that you want to see from your owners. Obviously, football is unpredictable, but in terms of getting the right structure in place, buying the right tools in order to get what you want to build, I think they're going exactly the way that you would want the ideal owners to go. So like you said, getting a DOF in place, making sure that you have enough investment to back Porter over the next 3 years. I think from there on, you've given him the perfect springboard to take the team wherever he can take it.
Yeah, and it's something that we've seen in American sports, no surprise, where in particularly the American version of football, where you'll have a new head coach or manager come in to the side, and sometimes they will be involved in the selection of a general manager who would effectively be the operational equivalent of a director in football. And so having this new type of replacement, most of those type of appointments, both with a head coach and a general manager in the U.S., you usually see that it's a multi-year process to truly transform the identity, and probably feels the most similar into what it's going to take to refresh the side, because in the NFL, players get drafted, they end up on teams. There are mechanisms to cut players maybe more effectively than in a Premier League or a European footballing side. or world footballing side than are open to, in the US. So I think there's some similarities that can be drawn to what we can expect to happen over the next 1, 2, 3 years and 1, 2, 3 additional windows, where Chelsea are going to have potentially a desire to, move into the market, acquire a player, maybe remove players off the books, bring players back off loan who've been successful. I do think we're in a time of uncertainty. Even though you talked about this optimism that you have, it is going to be interesting to see what type of transactions are made, what type of players are featured. And I think that kind of gets us into maybe the points I'd like to discuss with you, really kind of talking about Potter's examples of man management in the past, how he might apply that towards this squad, this team, on how he's been able to transform players. I think we've seen over the last few managers that there have been players who have come in from the periphery and found themselves as being a featured, contributor to our team. And then also like the tactical versatility, because I think that is the one thing that people maybe who haven't watched a ton of Brighton, which I know you have for your wonderful piece that you put out on your Substack, that people should definitely have read if they haven't already, what we can expect from Potter there. And so maybe if we kind of jump into it, the man management aspect and what we would anticipate from Potter here, both from what we've seen previously and how he's been able to bring people under his arm and then also potentially make tough decisions too. It seems like he's willing to do both, to invest and then also know when there's not an opportunity to invest anymore.
No, for certain. I think it's definitely an incredible skill set for a manager to have, to be able to manage a whole group of players, to keep them in check emotionally, to make sure that he understands what are their expectations and how to get the best out of them. And in the end, when you see the reports coming out post Tuchel's sacking, obviously a lot of it will be fictitious, will be, made up and for clicks or whatever. But it does indicate that a lot of players were unhappy in terms of being played out of position. There were a lot of conversations that were not being had. And I think the hierarchies looked at that and said, okay, we need somebody who can also function as a mediator, somebody who has those important conversations, has an open door policy where you can just walk in, share your concerns, and make sure that they're valued as players. And when I was doing my research for the piece, there were some very interesting aspects of his man management that came up. I was reading this piece by Sam Wallace for the Telegraph, and he says when one of his players said that when Potter was managing at Leeds Met, the university team, there was a player that who really liked to party. He was a really high flair kind of player, but sort of like Ronaldinho, loved to go out and have a night out. And instead of rebuking him or trying to ostracize him for his behavior, it was just, asking him the question that what exactly do you want from life? And if you've got so much skill, are you willing to throw it away for something that is temporary? And I think those questions got through. And he never tried to stop that behavior. He said, okay, you know what, do what you want to do, but be responsible. Make sure that it doesn't affect your performances and you're good with me. And I think that's an excellent example of how you manage different people, because not everybody's going to be, your hardcore disciplinary kind of player who comes in 100% focused. There are going to be little issues here and there. I think another example that I read in The Guardian talked about when in Sweden there was a preseason camp that gone to Tenerife, and there was this player who had apparently a pretty bad reputation in Sweden, and a lot of players were asking questions, saying, why is he here and what is he doing here? Like, he's on trial. Why are we going through this? And Potter just walked in and said, look, we're all from different backgrounds. We've all come from different places. We've had different experiences. So who are we to judge? It's just all about coming together and pulling in the right direction. And a lot of players sort of talked about, that team spirit in terms of, yes, we're pulling in the same direction. So why ask questions of individuals when you can behave as a unit? And I think that's very important. It's something that he's managed to do wherever he's been. A lot of players talk about his game plan, for example, at Swansea against Manchester City, believing that, you can take on the best team, one of the best clubs in Europe, and in the championship pose a serious threat to them. And I think Potter just gave them the tools to do it, the courage to do it. And I think speaks volumes about him as a motivator, him as a as a person who's the glue that keeps everything together. So I think that's something that this set of players desperately needs. And there are a lot of people who are probably disgruntled with the way selections have been handled, the way they've been played, the way conversations have been had, and hopefully Porter can come in and fix that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is when you start to dig into players, I would say more at Brighton, where the complement of the side is, going to give him the luxury of more senior players, people who are maybe more experienced in the league, have an ability to scout and sign talented players and maybe some of his prior appointments. That while he has used, when you kind of look at who are maybe some of the individuals who made the most appearances under him, no surprise, Lewis Dunk is the top individual with almost 10,000 minutes, 110 appearances. But as you kind of go down that list and remembering that he was there for multiple seasons, you see someone like Sanchez who's made 70 appearances, who's only 24, and has been there for 3 years, getting 6,300 minutes, 6,400 minutes, that he's not adverse to that man management of trusting youth players in addition to also finding ways to rotate in more senior or experienced players.
And that's going to be supremely important here because we've got arguably one of the best academies in the world. So a lot of players coming through. He's got some extremely good talent, just on the cusp of making the jump to the first team. We've talked about Carney, we've talked about Gallagher, we talked about Cassidy and all these players, Omari Hutchinson, and this exciting crop of players that has come in this summer as well. And I think, like you mentioned, he is very open to taking risks. He is also, weirdly enough, a pragmatist. So he understands that there are motivations for younger players to take on those risks and to improve, and he's very open to molding them in the image that obviously he likes for the team, but also something tailored to their strengths. I think he's incredible at doing that. He recognizes players for what they are, for what they bring, their strengths, and he's very adept at seeing certain flaws in the system or certain lacunae in the system and saying, this is where I can make sure that you fit in while making the entire unit stronger. So I think it's going to be one of his challenges because Tuchel's sort of hesitancy to play the youth and to engage with it, I think, sort of did not strike well with the hierarchy. So it will be definitely one of those football manager kind of briefs. We would like you to get youth players from the academy into the first team. So I think that's definitely going to be an important part of his managerial aspects as well.
As he's coming in, and we know that there have been issues with the squad in terms of happiness. We know for a fact that certain players were linked with wanting a departure. Someone like Ziyech would be maybe an example of someone who had been shopped to other clubs, both Milan and Ajax, a return there, but was potentially priced out of a move. We do know that not everyone is feeling like their time at Chelsea is going great, and this man management aspect is really going to be put to the test by Potter. As you look at the existing squad, and obviously we don't want to make too many assumptions about who's happy or unhappy, but if people are saying, hey, there's multiple credible reports linking a player to wanting to leave, to being open to a move, to being willing to reduce their salary to make that move happen, then who do you think Potter is going to put their arm around and really try to take the full advantage of his skill set when it comes to that man management here at Chelsea?
I would definitely look at, the usual suspects, I would say, in terms of players who've been criticized under Tuchel for perhaps underperforming, for not stepping up when they should be. Like Ziyech, for example, is somebody that you mentioned. The amount of criticism he has got, I would say, rightly so for his last couple of performances. It's a little jarring for me, to be honest, as somebody who's watched him extensively from his Ajax days. This is not the Ziyech that I know and I know can sort of pull out world class performances in the Champions League. I think I feel a little bad for him because under Tuchel he used to come on for 15 minutes and was given a limited time frame to impress the manager, and that's exactly what happened in this first game for Potter as well. He came on, wanting to make sure that the manager knew what he was capable of, and ended up just making bizarre decisions and playing hero ball. I think that's definitely something he has to improve upon. And Potter should, for one, just put his arm around him and say, look, you will get your opportunities. Calm down. You don't have to impress me with goals. What you're probably the best at is, creating opportunities from thin air. He's got the deliveries to make it right. And that one chance that he created for Armando Broya with a dangerous cross, I think that's far more valuable than him taking 15 pot shots from anywhere that he gets the ball at. So I think that would be Potter's first brief, saying, look, when you put your mind to it, you can create, you can, be an asset for the team. I think this is a guy who's created 100 chances over a season in the Eredivisie. So even if you translate those chance creation metrics to the Premier League, he's somebody who's contributed fairly well. It's just about trying to find the right kind of rhythm to make sure that he knows that he has the time and won't be, shunted into the cold. I think Potter needs to take that step and probably decide for now whether he is going to be part of the first team picture, or it's just best to give him bit part roles and make sure that the next possible opportunity you can move him to wherever he wants to go. Pulisic again is somebody who is an interesting question mark for me. His contract runs out in 2024. He was asked about, I think, his contract situation in preseason, didn't divulge too much. But how Potter tends to utilize him is also something very interesting. I think how he ascertains Pulisic's profile is going to be very impressive, because he's lost his pace. It's clearly lost that vital yard of acceleration that made him electric at Dortmund. So I think it's going to be Potter's sort of prerogative to take into account where does he fit in. If he's not going to be the quick attacker that he used to be, maybe can you utilize him in an off the ball runner kind of role at wing back again? And how does Pulisic take to playing at wing back? I think that's also going to be a question mark. And Kai Havertz, I think that's the biggest one for me. He is the marquee signing from seasons ago, still has to hit the kind of heights that we expected out of him. I actually, for one, did see some very encouraging signs from Havertz when he was played by Potter. I think Potter understands the kind of player he is. He wasn't really, the first attacker in attack. He was drifting in between, trying to pick up and link up, and then arrive late into the box. I think that's something that he's very good at. And hopefully, a couple of games of rhythm and making sure that he's gotten used to this new role will bring the best out of him. So, those three players for me are, need instant attention. Everybody else can sort of slowly develop the kind of understanding they need in Potter's system. But individually, these three are the ones that I'm looking at.
I think as we advance the conversation a little bit, not only is Potter really exceptional at placing his arm around someone and making the tough call potentially to move on from someone as well. I think Maupay going to Everton is an example of what he was doing at Brighton, where it was like, okay, this isn't going to advance any further. We're not going to make a positive movement here. Let's get him on and let's get invested into someone who is going to be here, who wants to commit. He does have a talent for taking someone, and I don't think it's square peg, round hole, but I think it is more like Play-Doh, right? Where, if the player is not fully formed, or they are flexible in their nature, and he's able to help them conform or evolve or shape them appropriately, to get back to the Play-Doh analogy, to really help them fit what they can do best and how they can best support the team. Thinking about someone like McAllister with his recent success. Trossard is one, Pascal Gross is another, that he is able to work with a multitude of different players. And I guess as you've seen that at his time at Brighton, and then maybe apply that to the Chelsea lens, what are some examples we can pull from to say, hey, based upon what he was able to do here, what could he do with the crop of Chelsea players at his disposal?
It's probably one of his strongest managerial aspects. He understands strengths of players really well. He profiles them accurately. And like you said, I think he's pretty much an educator first, instead of a manager. Somebody who likes to give his player challenges, saying that, all right, if you will play in this role, what can you offer me that is different from what you play in your conventional role. It's something that he did with Pascal Gross a lot, playing him at 8, making sure that he was played also in the half spaces as what Tuchel calls the half winger position, behind the center forward, and seeing if you can do playmaking duties in those tight spaces by receiving and distributing. How do you perform there? And at the end of um, Graham Potter's tenure, I think Pascal Gross emerged as an excellent example of somebody who benefited from playing many roles and understanding what he needs to do at different areas of the pitch. And when I look at those possibilities here, there are some adjustments that he can make. Like I said, Havertz is somebody that he played in sort of like a floating 10 position in the first game against Salzburg. I think there could be chances that he plays as an 8 as well, just to see how he functions there, what his understanding is in midfield. Can he be a Gallagher kind of player, somebody who's more off the ball, arriving at the edge of the box? Obviously, his work rate is an asset, and it's something that he's applied to McAllister as well. He was playing as an 8, was playing as a 10, suddenly was pushed further back and said, can you provide the same principles at 6? Give me industry, show me what you can do in terms of creation from deeper positions, and I will get you long shot opportunities, which you obviously enjoy. So can you do that? So I think Havertz, there is a lot of scope to experiment with him. Can he be an 8? Can he be a right-sided attacking midfielder in a 4-2-3-1? How does he perform there? Maybe as one of two forwards, or like we saw the 3-5-1-1 that he likes playing at Brighton. Can he be the lone attacking midfielder behind the center forward? And what does he offer there as a second forward? I also look at Mount. I think there is a lot of scope to utilize Mount in different ways. Obviously, somebody who's played already a couple of positions. You've seen him play wide, you've seen him play as a 10, you've seen him play as an 8. Interestingly, Pascal Gross was also played at center forward, as was Tariq Lamptey. So we might see Mason Mount probably go in those positions as one of two wide forwards, just to see, what his behavior is there, like how he likes to receive, what he's doing when he's playing as the furthest forward. I think those thought experiments for Potter will be very interesting to see in the coming weeks. But yeah, I think there is ample scope to utilize. In the article, I mentioned Jorginho as a third CP. I think that was me sort of going on a different tangential plane altogether. Somebody like Frankie's playing that position for PSG, and he looked really good. So how does Jorginho play as a libero in a back three? I think something as outlandish as this is not beyond the ambit of Graham Potter. So I think he just needs probably 3-4 weeks, maybe a couple of months to accurately assess what his players are capable of, and then probably we will see his ideas translate. I think the first lineup was a very politically correct lineup, full of senior players, making sure everybody is happy, making sure his influential figures are there, and they're getting game time. But we will see his ideas evolve. He's played a lot of formations. He's just going to try a couple of them out and see what brings the best out of which player.
I think that's something to make sure that people understand is when we started last season without really getting a preseason effectively for some of our players. This is the second year in a row where we thought we had a preseason. And I will tell you, I was on that preseason tour for a lot of those dates. It didn't feel like we had a true preseason to really get this squad put together, and particularly with so many of the player transactions coming later in the window, which is just the nature of concluding a £4.25 billion investment very late into the May time period, that it was always going to continue to push back further and further how quickly this team and this club could get started in unifying this thought across the first team, the manager, the ownership, on what we were going to do, how we were going to go attack the season. That Potter goes into his first week, has a match called off, has another match called off, so 2 matches called off already, which, oh, by the way, those will get rescheduled at some point during the busiest parts of our season, whether that's across Champions League, Cup competitions, and the Premier League. And now had 1 match with players before they effectively go on an international break. And for a vast majority of our team, they tend to be the players that get called up to support and play in their national teams. And this is the last prep for the World Cup. And he's not going to have the full complement of players there at Cobham to work with over the period. But you would almost wonder, is this a place where he could try? Is there behind closed doors matches potentially with teams or clubs in the area that may be willing to go to Cobham and play a match that will never see the light of the Fifth Stand app or Chelsea TV, but will only get reported about with a scoreline at some kind of covert manner after the fact. But that there is going to be a betting in time for Potter that is likely we don't see his true side until post World Cup and maybe even late January, February, because there also might be other player transactions that happen then.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Dan. I mean, the lack of a preseason definitely is a question mark. It's also the speed of the managerial appointment post Tuchel that sort of took me by surprise. And, he's already had 5-6 games with Brighton. So obviously he's been extremely busy preparing for that. And I don't think he's had, apart from the opposition analysis that he's done on us while playing against us, which is probably a sample size of 3, 4, 5 games maybe, and done by his opposition scouts. I think this time also lets him sit back, watch the games himself, understand what he has at his disposal, maybe draft off, plans that he can utilize when his players are back from the international break. I think brain space is a major factor that we haven't considered. Even if the players aren't there, it's just having a little space for him to, see what he has at his disposal. Some players won't get called up. For example, just earlier in the evening, I was talking about, does Zakaria get a call up? Because he wasn't there, for Switzerland in June. So is he going to be at Cobham? Is he going to be there with Potter training and, like you said, maybe playing close doors friendlies, and Potter gets an accurate look at him to see what he can offer, and then we see him integrated into the side and what he can offer. Aubameyang, for example, I don't know if there are some certain fixtures that he will be called up for. Are they friendlies? Are they, qualifiers or something? I'm still yet to see that, but does he go, or like, does he sort of recuperate from his injury and stay with Potter to do stuff? So I think that also gives him a lot of time to just ruminate on the ideas that he has. And hopefully by the time players do come back, he won't feel like games are coming thick and fast. He will have a clear idea on things he wants to try out, and probably then go by the blueprint. And maybe by January, February, like you said, maybe have a better holistic idea of what the squad is, what it needs. And like you said, it's not even a complete squad, is it? Like, we don't know what profile of center forwards we're going to have next season. Is Oba going to be first choice? He's got, I think, a 2+1 year contract. So what are we going to do next season with him? What do we do when this prodigal son returns? Lukaku comes back from Inter Milan. Like, does he have a clean slate? How is the dressing room going to react? Is he going to be sent back on a second year? So who is the center forward going to be? What does our midfield look like post Jorginho and Kante? So I think those ideas will also change. He himself will be assessing it in terms of how he wants the team to look probably a year down the line. But the idea is just to make sure that whatever he has in terms of a core team, he knows their strengths by the time next season comes. He absolutely has, 100% idea of, these are my players, and this is exactly what I want to build around. Plus, these are the positions I want them to play in. The rest can be built around when we have a DOF to identify the right kind of players, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, when you think about the fact that maybe some of the players coming off of longer injury, like N'Golo Kante, not getting called up by France, new most expensive Chelsea defender signing, Wesley Fofana doesn't get called up. So there are going to be players around Cobham who will get a chance to benefit during this break period by being able to introduce themselves to the manager and show off who they are, what they can offer to him. And I don't know how many of them, I think Chalobah to me is also an interesting one from a individual who has played kind of in a defensive mid capacity on loan before. Is that someone who Potter says, let me try you here if we do have a little bit of a logjam at the right center back position in a back three? and see if you can do a job here in terms of helping us be more defensive solidity. Obviously, his really exceptional passing range that we'd be able to take advantage of. So I think that's the other one kind of that I kind of put an asterisk on, is just I'm curious to see if there's a deployment where maybe we do see Chalobah tested from a defensive mid responsibility heading into the latter, the next part of the season rather.
No, for sure. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek is also, I think, a very interesting player in terms of his tactical versatility. He's also getting a lot of his, pace that had been elusive for the longest time. I think just watching him blitz past one of the Salzburg centre backs the other day for a cutback, I think it just proves that, physically he's getting his skills back in the head in terms of his confidence. Also, he's definitely recovered a lot of the mojo that had been lost. So how does he react? I don't think he's going to get called up for the World Cup. So Potter's going to have extended amount of time with him. Does he become somebody like a right centre back who sort of progresses the ball from there? Does he sort of play in a three-man midfield as the deepest midfielder? Does he become an eight? Does he become a right-sided wide mid? I don't. There are so many possibilities for Potter to take into consideration. So I think, like you said, these are all thought experiments that will come with time. It's very important for Potter in general to understand what exactly he has right now. I don't think he needs to think 6 months down the line. Kante again, like I don't know what's going to happen with him. Negotiations have slowed down. He wants a longer deal at 290K, with his injury issues. Are we willing to give him that? And if not, then what is the replacement that we get in? Because nobody's replacing N'Golo Kante. So I think those are questions that also need a long-term think and will probably be addressed only 3-4 months down the line. So yeah, lots of questions, a lot of challenges, but lots of good points as well. We can probably sit down and has a really good talent pool to go with. As long as he keeps them happy, I think the results will start coming sooner rather than later.
Well, speaking of results, I think the last thing that we need to talk about with Potter's appointment is just the word that keeps on coming up with everyone we've spoken with, or the articles that we've seen written, yours and others, is just not just the tactical versatility, but the flexibility that Potter has, both in how he sets up a team initially, and then the in-game ability and willingness to switch when something isn't working, from whether it's 3 at the back to a 4, whether it's a diamond midfield, whether it's 2 attackers up top, that there's a willingness to play a lot with what's available to him. And maybe do you want to comment on what you've seen in some of those tactical deployments and where you think he'll find comfort given the personnel that Chelsea will offer him at his disposal?
Oh wow! Well, I think he's somebody who's who's definitely he's got a fix for everything. He is in London, his Blue podcast style. He is the real Tinkerman. Somebody who's got back to front in terms of he's got a response to every single problem. I think he's excellent at anticipating the issues that can rise in game, when teams are responding to a certain game plan. I think he devises a game plans. He understands where the deficiencies might be, and he has game plans for those game plans, which I think is very, very interesting from a managerial perspective. Somebody who's extremely intelligent and, like you said, not afraid to make in-game decisions whenever required. And I think the magic moment came for me when everybody knows that Marcos Alonso holding up 3 fingers, in Conte's season and us going on that run. There was this time, I think it was against Fulham, where he switched to a back 4, and Tariq Lamptey showed 4 fingers, and I said, "This is it. This is the moment, when everything starts changing." So they went back to a back 4 because Fulham were trying to exploit them in wider areas, trying to position their attackers between the wide centre back and the wing backs, and was causing Brighton a lot of problems. And he immediately improvised, and the pressure just dissipated. Sort of unfortunate in the end, an own goal, and just lost the game because of that. But just tends to show that he is very switched on. He doesn't wait till half time to gather his notes and understand the situation. Somebody who works on the fly. Everything from working on what shape that he needs to do for build up. We saw that last night as well. everybody knew that Salzburg as a Red Bull team loves playing narrow, want to be very compact and have players who will press really, really hard. So he just, got a very asymmetrical shape where the wide centre backs like Cucurella and Azpilicueta were far wide. You also got the attackers, sort of the wing backs moving forward. So you had a double sort of conundrum for Salzburg's fullbacks to not just provide width, but to also deal with two players trying to progress play on the flank. So it's something that he, is very good at in terms of what build up optimizes my gameplay. Which personnel do I want in that system? Does the goalkeeper participate as the third build-up block, or do I just persist with my centre backs and go through Jorginho and all these things? The attackers as well. He sometimes switches to two attackers, sometimes to one. The midfield composition. There are some very interesting examples of how he used midfield to counteract certain threats. The Manchester United games, I think, are the ones that stand out for me, where he saw a double pivot of Fred and McTominay, which wasn't really secure in the first phase of possession. They weren't really very technically confident on the ball when receiving from the goalkeeper. So he used a 3-box-3, a box midfield to sort of overload the central midfielders, and Brighton got past them fairly easily. It was just using that tactical loo, making sure that he had the right kind of players to perform that role and offer a tactical advantage. I think in knockout games, that kind of tactical awareness, that kind of flexibility is going to be a huge plus. We saw that with Thomas Tuchel. So I think in terms of utilizing our squads, I think major plus point as a knockout side is going to be very important, because obviously the PL team building will take a long, long time. So the best way to maximize his longevity is to win, trophies, and most trophies are, well, knockout challenges. So I think it's going to be trying to utilize our team to go deep in certain competitions, reach the Champions League, deeper phases, and try getting an FA Cup or one of those trophies, just to pacify, the transition process, the rebuilding process, and then work towards making a side that can also function in the league. It's not as easy as it looks. Obviously, when you look at, say, the Champions League, where technically secure sides, where sides that keep the ball tend to do very, very well. And I think this year in the Champions League, we've had the most possession out of any team with 65%. So, it just shows that on the ball, we are very good. But in terms of getting a faster, more direct approach, it's something that Potter is also very good at. His Brighton side, had centre backs that could ping long balls, very, very switched on to going direct with McAllister, line breaking passes from everywhere. So having a side that can do both, get you a guy that can do both. I think that's going to be the long term goal for Potter, to have a side that can keep the ball in the Champions League, frustrate opponents, and also do direct transitions, can also attack in numbers, make sure that you've got midfield runners who can contribute to goals in the league. I think that's going to be his long term goal, a hybrid team that can do everything.
Yeah, I think as you talk about that, I think it's a healthy reminder that formations are about movement and how you're going to move the ball against an opposition, how you're going to break them down, how you're going to find and open passing lanes to create chances and capitalize on those chances to win a game effectively. If we're just thinking about the logical element of it. And while we have only a small sample size, 90 minutes of football against Salzburg, I think what you started to see is a little bit more of that direct play that you mentioned, trying to move the ball through the center of the pitch at times, and then also trying to get those crosses into runners in the box. And while the timing wasn't great, I think the Reece James cross in particular, with Aubameyang and Sterling both kind of maybe just being a few steps behind where they could have been, it feels as if we're going to really try to challenge other teams with speed when we're moving the ball and to arrive on time, which has been a very challenging prospect for this team to get up to sync with having refreshed the whole attack, with having, new players in key positions on the pitch. And I think that is one thing that, if we talk about what we should anticipate from these formations, is more continuity by playing players together that don't have the same chemistry yet, that don't understand, hey, if I see Reese on the ball here as a Aubameyang, I should already be in the box, or I should already be making my run because I'm not going to be caught off sides. And if Potter can do that with these formations, that's, I think, where people ask the question, where are the goals going to come from? That, to me, feels like the most logical answer, is that it's going to come from improved timing and quicker delivery from those wide positions into central players.
Right, definitely. I think it's all about trying to figure out. Obviously, you've got so many profiles in the team that thrive on running into space. When you look at Armando Broya, for example, he excelled at Southampton because they are a team that love playing, pressing in the mid block, making sure they won the ball, and then playing their forwards in behind. You had Timo, you have Havertz, obviously, who comes from the Bundesliga. A lot of players who enjoy running into space, running off the shoulder, not really accustomed to being up against a static wall of six. So I think it's just going to be Potter's brief to say, all right, we've got a lot of players who like stretching their legs and running like gazelles into the attacking third from deeper positions. So can we quicken the pace a little bit? I think there was this moment just when there was an equipment failure with the referee yesterday. We saw him talking to Jorginho and give him instructions saying you need to put the ball in faster. You need to be a little quicker in terms of delivering the ball. And right after that interruption, we saw two attempts to play a direct ball in behind. I think there was a through ball from Mount, which sort of like hit the defender, but was aimed at Aubameyang in the attacking third, but did not reach him. So I think those little tweaks in terms of giving the players the freedom to make those mistakes, not be so paranoid about losing the ball, um, it will pay dividends. It just, better risk gets you better rewards. I think that's going to be a given, and you have the profiles in the side to sort of maximize the kind of creation potential that you have. Like, for instance, Jorginho in his last season at Napoli created 48 chances, which is, I think, one more than Mount created in the entirety of last season. And Jorginho did it as a six. And at Chelsea, he's done 29, 23, 24, 25 chances in his first last four seasons. So obviously he's also been asked to be a little more of a possession circulator, a little more of an orchestrator, a conductor of possession, rather than somebody who's actively looking to find, Gonzalo Higuain or Dries Mertens in the attacking third. You've got the qualities there. Can you give him the confidence to say, don't worry about losing the ball? We've got a structure that will facilitate winning the ball back and making sure that you're secure. So I think those risks will be taken. And hopefully, like you said, if we can time our arrival at the edge of the box, if we can get our forwards to run in behind in the right moments. We saw a couple of instances there yesterday. There was a wonderful Ziyech chance that hit the keeper. A couple of 3-4 passes, really quick passes. Broya with the cross from out wide. Ziyech with a shot. I think those quick interchanges and sequences is something that we can look forward to seeing. It's something that Brighton did very well, and hopefully we will see those occur more frequently in the coming weeks.
So as we look ahead, we're in May 2023. It's the end of the season. If you were to chart back and say Graham Potter had a successful season because he did these two or three things, what are the items that you would say are how you're going to look for the definition of success, with the assumption that Graham Potter is kind of hit the ownership marks of success, which is continuing in the Champions League for another season as just the base minimum expectation for the heading into the 2023-2024 Premier League season, which made me feel a little sick saying, because I don't want to envision us that far forward in the future, but maybe just the end of the season.
Well, I'm going to be very pragmatic and say that I probably want him to go deep in the Champions League. Definitely build on what is already there, show that he can optimize it. Obviously we've got a new look defense, but hopefully get us out of the Champions League group stages, get us into the knockout rounds, have a good couple of performances against more fancied sides, and show that he can utilize the defensive structure that he has at Brighton, and sort of translate the same thing at Chelsea. I think that's going to be a big plus for me. Improve one of the under fancied players, I would say either Ziyech, Pulisic, or Havertz. If Kai Havertz ends up hitting 15 goals, in the league or something like that, then for me, automatic credit money in the bank. For me, that's going to be, yes, he's got ideas in terms of how he wants to improve the players. So definite big plus. Make sure that individually you're able to eke out and tease out a lot more of what has been untapped potential. I think that's going to be a big plus for me. And the larger thing would be maybe show us some glimpses of a larger identity, like what vision do you have for this side? Like, are we going to be, somebody from a throwback Jose era where we're defensively very strong and then we can score the goals and shut shop? Or is it going to be free flowing football with a goal conceded here and there, but, the attackers showing really good understanding with midfielders? Or is it even, showing a completely different hybrid style where you're able to adapt your game according to whatever opposition you're facing, and coming out on tops with just intelligent play? I think some aspects of those philosophies of that identity will be very interesting to see. Obviously, like I said, there are a lot of missing parts. I don't think we still have a first choice number 9. I don't think we have our first choice central midfielders for the long term. So that can wait. But seeing some aspects of it with existing players, I think would also be a big plus for me. So I'm not asking for trophies, but an FA Cup would be nice.
Well, let's just hope that everything that you've said is where we end up at the end of this season. Looking forward to another fruitful summer transfer window with a trophy in one hand and a progression into next year's Champions League in another, with all of us backing Potter and being very proud of the success he's achieved. But that will do it for this part of our Grand Potter Pod special, Make Pod Mega Pod. So Sam, thanks for jumping in and playing a part in it, and we'll have you back many more times this season to chat about how Potter is doing.
No, definitely. Pleasure was all mine, Dan. And really, really happy and looking forward to it. Like I said, cautiously optimistic, but still a lot more time to wait before we see him next in action. So going to be a long wait, and I will have a lot more of, time passing to do before I get there. So hopefully I can keep my idle mind working until then.